2. Whoo!
Welcome to Authenticity Lab, a podcast where we celebrate the connection with our authentic selves. I'm Dr. Kelsey Miles. I'm a musician, a songwriter, and also a chemistry professor. I use science and songwriting to help me understand my world within and the world around me. Every episode, I'll share a new story, and then I'll break it down using the scientific method. And my hope is that this podcast will help you live more boldly so you can lead a life of curiosity and become who you truly are. Life isn't about getting it all perfect and not having challenges. There's gonna be ups and downs. There's gonna be lots of uncertainty. How do we honor ourselves through all of that uncertainty? Today's podcast episode, we're talking about this really uncertain space of where you know you don't want what you currently have, but you're not quite sure what you actually want. Let's dive in. This in-between space I'm talking about is that feeling of stuckness, knowing you need to make a change, but not quite sure what that change is. You know, in our culture, we have this idea that we need to know what the next step is. We need to feel safe knowing we know exactly what to do. And often we are pressured by society and the people around us because it kind of seems like everyone has it all worked out. And it couldn't be further from the truth. This podcast episode is actually inspired by a message I received from a previous student of mine. And we've had continued wonderful conversations about this idea of what do I do next? And their particular state of being was they know that they want to go to med school. This is something that they've wanted for a long time. They want to go to medical school. And they've gone through my organic chemistry courses and they did really well and graduated and in society, especially in academics, this is like very drilled into you where they ask you like what's your degree? What do you want to be when you grow up? And this question they asked me was, you know, just sharing. I'm not sure I want to go to medical school, which is wild because they knew they had spent so much time working towards that goal, and now they aren't sure about it. You know, this is something that affects us all the time. When you know you don't really like where you're at right now, and you can start to dream of things of where you'd like to be, but you aren't quite sure that's what you want. In this story, they aren't sure about whether or not they should go to med school, the pressures of going there, the knowing that it's going to be years of hard work and not even sure if they're going to like it on the other side of it. This in-between space is absolutely, it's just chaos creating. It's very difficult to move through. And in this podcast episode, I'm going to offer a couple of things that have helped me when I've spent a lot of time overthinking the parts of my life where I was in the in-between space. And I wish I had given myself some of these tools I'm going to share. It's really what I learned by being so uncomfortable in the in-between space and sometimes making decisions too quickly. So I'm going to share also a personal part of my life when I had this in-between moment. And I really put too much pressure on myself. So I was a full-time musician for several years where I traveled around playing shows at bars and restaurants. And mind you, this is after I spent 11 years studying chemistry. So me just shifting from chemistry to music was this huge, like there's a big in-between space there where I put so much pressure on myself to make this decision. And then after several years of being a full-time musician, I found myself in the same spot. Now, I wasn't stuck. I was making a living. I was still enjoying it, but really not enjoying it as much as I used to. I had stopped drinking alcohol, so playing at bars wasn't as fun. You know, getting people buying me shots, they'd end up on the back of I remember they'd end up on the back of my harmonica amp. And at the end of the night, I'd bring them up to the bartender. And I stopped having as much fun playing these bar shows. They were 3 or 4 hours long. and they just weren't doing it for me. And the interesting part about this is it wasn't just that I didn't want to do it anymore. I had so much pressure that I'd put on myself because I'd made this decision to go this route. You know, when you make a decision to go this route, and then after a little bit of time, you're like, this isn't quite what I want. Immediately, if you're anything like me, our brains start to shame us because, well, why did we go down this path if this isn't what you wanted and this is what you wanted? And so in those moments, those in between moments where you're like, I don't want this anymore, I don't quite know exactly what I want to do next. This is when you have to give yourself grace. And if I'd given myself a little more grace, it would have been much easier. This pressure I put on myself by saying to myself, I made this decision, so I should stick with it, was really not helpful. I couldn't just ignore the feeling that I didn't want to do this anymore. So let's pause here. In this in between moment, and maybe you're feeling one now, whether it's for a career change or in a relationship or really anything in your life, when you want to move, maybe you don't like the house that you're living in currently. We often have worked so hard to get to where we're at that we put pressure on ourselves when we now don't want it as much anymore. And that doesn't do you any good. It really doesn't. And we know it logically. We know that extra pressure we put on ourselves doesn't help. However, we do it because we've grown up in spaces where we're told we need to pick something and choose and hurry. And we're in this hustle culture where we have to do the next thing and we're going to feel better once we get to the next thing. And this whole journey is not about the end point. It's about the journey and what we can gain from it. So, what if in this in between moment, the very next time that you feel unsure about what to do next, you know it's not this, but you're not quite sure if it's that, whatever that is for you. In my case, it was full time music, playing bars and restaurants. It was a world I knew very well. I had lots of contacts. I could just keep doing this. I was so frustrated. I didn't want to just keep doing this. And I had to reframe it. So we're going to do a reframing exercise. And what if you just pause and decide in this in-between time that you are at, if you just reframe it and say, it's okay to not know. Really let that sink in. It's okay to not know. And then at the very same time, I want you to introduce this idea that you already know. The reason that you are feeling in an in between space is because you already know something isn't working for you anymore. What you're doing is putting pressure on yourself by it not being a forever thing. And you can't know that. In fact, I'd argue that the only thing you can be sure about is change. The moment that you get anything in life, you are going to expand and grow. So, doesn't it make sense that your wants, your needs, your desires, those are also going to expand and grow? So, something you had planned maybe 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago, that this was going to be the thing, it would make sense that, well, you might change your mind. So, why don't we reframe it and tell ourselves that it's okay? It's okay to change our minds. Now, immediately your brain might go to, well, what am I supposed to do next? For my student who was worried about if they should go to med school or not, my advice to them was to lay off the pressure of yourself for deciding that. So let's talk about a life experiment that you can do so that you can move through this in between space and get the most out of the in between space. The idea isn't to not ever be in the in between space. The in between spaces between where you're at and what you're becoming is the most beautiful spot where you can gain so much information about yourself. It's these moments that you can pause and learn more about what you've grown into so you can move on to the next one. And here's the other thing. The more comfortable we get with the in-between space coming up, the more easy our life will feel because the in between spaces, they never stop. Like I said, the moment that you get to the next step and you'll grow and expand into it, you're going to have another in between space. So if not this in between space, the next one you'll be challenged again with feeling like you aren't doing enough because you don't know exactly what to do. Reframe it, give yourself some grace, and tell yourself, this is exactly where I need to be. And maybe instead of it being bad that I'm not sure, maybe this is this moment of clarity. This is the wisdom that I've gained from taking that last step I took. So, the first step of the scientific method is to ask a question. And our question in this in between space is, what do I do when I don't know what to do? To move to the next step, which is a hypothesis, this requires you to drop some of the pressure you're putting on yourself because a hypothesis is moving towards an educated guess of what will happen. So we'll be kind of looking at the future. You can't pressure yourself in this moment by saying, well, I told myself I would be here, so I'm going to stay here. Well, guess what? Your question of what do I do when I don't know what to do, that's an invitation from your inner self. You're being invited to look at the options. That's all this is. The in-between space is an invitation. When you don't know what to do, it's just inviting you to look at it. So, what if we decided to have a hypothesis that maybe I'll learn a little more about the different options, and if I learn a little more, that'll give me more clarity? That's a really nice small step that you can take to help you move through it. So let's set up a life experiment. In this case, for my example, when I was talking about wanting to no longer play bar shows, my small experiment that I did was I started to say no. I started to say no to gigs I didn't want to do. Now, I didn't know how I was going to make a full-time living from music, from songwriting at that point. And by the way, I still don't know. However, I started to enjoy things a little more. I wasn't doing the bar shows that I really didn't want to do. And so by just taking that small step of saying, well, I want to gain a little more data about this. I'm going to start saying no to the things I don't want to do. That'll give me a little bit more room to say yes to the things I do want to do. In the case with my previous student who wasn't sure about going to medical school, a small experiment they could run would be to make sure they are enjoying the things they're currently doing. It's really difficult to know what's best for you in the next step if you also have lots of things around you that you're not enjoying. And pay attention to the things you are enjoying. So we started to walk through what they're currently doing at their current job, and they had already made some changes with that and doing some administrative work and HR work that they really enjoyed. And so that helped us kind of learn a little bit more about what you do like. Now, the next step of the scientific method is to gain a little bit of data and understanding of that data. In the case of my student, I haven't gotten there yet. We're still in the throes of communication. So if you're listening, this is what I would offer next to you. When we started to look at the parts of your life that are really great, you can start to pick out that you enjoy meaningful work. You enjoy seeing the ball moving forward. You enjoy putting effort in and seeing how it is helping others. And that's something to kind of hang your hat on to where still maybe not sure if you want to apply for medical school, but you've just uncovered a truth for yourself, which will help you as you do the next step. And when it comes to a conclusion of these small steps we start to take, I hope that the idea you start to realize is that it's not that you'll know this huge next step for yourself by just thinking about it. You have to keep moving. You have to keep trying things. And one way you can find the best conclusions is when you say, I don't have to have this all figured out right now. And when you relieve yourself of that pressure, you might find something like my student did, which was they found meaningful work in what they were doing. Now, this again doesn't help you answer the question of what the next step is. And the most difficult thing to learn, and you probably found this out in your own life, is you're the only one that's going to know what's right for you. So the idea isn't to just sit in isolation and to figure it out. The idea for you to find out what's best for you is to start to take the small steps. For me, with my music career, by just starting to say no, that started to open up some ideas for me. That is actually why I had the space to create my lyrical journey and my journal, my I Am Lyrical journal. That's the space that helped me create a science infused music show that I just put that on just last month in Wisconsin and got that filmed. And I can't wait to share with you what I created. It helped me get into some spaces that I did enjoy. And so, although I don't quite know what's next for me, I'm getting much more okay with that in between space. And while I'm in the in between space, I'm enjoying it a whole lot more. Now, I know what you might be thinking if you're currently in the in between space, which is that's great, but I need to know. And I want to remind you that you needing to know exactly what that next step is going to look like is exactly what's holding you back. Uh, Keep in mind, you deciding that you don't like where you're currently at is an invitation for you to lean back, look around, and start to pick up data, start to run small experiments, start to drop things that don't serve you, and start to add things that you kind of want to try. Keep in mind that the more data you collect, the more likely you're going to be able to make a decision that does feel best for you. This isn't something that you have to do fast. We get told all the time that something's wrong with us if we don't know what we want to do. I can't tell you how many times in college and graduate school where I was just around all these people that knew exactly what they wanted to do, and I always felt like there was something wrong with me. And when I stopped thinking that, it helped me kind of just do the things I wanted to do next, which led me to exactly where I needed to be. And why do we think that it's wrong that we don't know what the next step is? That could be something that would be really useful for you to think about. Is this someone else's voice that's telling you that you need to have it figured out? So, your challenge this week, if you're in this in between zone, don't overthink it. I am the queen of overthinking things, and it always makes things worse. What I'd suggest you do is pause and get off your own back. Remind yourself that the moment that you don't like something is the moment you get to learn more about yourself. And this in between moment isn't something that this discomfort that you feel isn't bad. It's an opportunity. I know that that sounds so cliche, but it's true. This will make you feel more resilient and able to step through any challenges that come up. You also won't get stuck. I have seen people, I've done it myself where when I'm in the in-between zone and I know I don't want to be here. Oh, this one's hitting hard. I know I don't want to be right here. I will plant my feet harder and I will say, I know I don't want to be here, but I worked so hard and I need to be okay with it. Don't do that to yourself. There's a reason that part of you is just like, I don't really like this as much. Why don't you just make that okay? Make that okay that you don't like it. I have, I've, I hate to say the word wasted, but I've wasted time. And it's so frustrating. I've wasted time by just, doubling down on something because I'd spent so much time doing it. Why did I put myself through that? You can't ignore that inner intuition saying something about, I don't really like this. I wanted to share one of my songs from my I Am album. This is the 10th track on the album. It's called I Wish I Was Wrong, which is an odd thing to wish you were wrong, but I really did because my intuition told me I don't like this. And I didn't want to listen. And this is what happens when you double down on something that you don't like, that in between zone, and you choose to not move. These are lyrics from this song, and I'll play it for you. It says, I trust my intuition. You know, it's always kept me safe. But this time, I didn't listen. And now I feel betrayed.
I trust my intuition. You know, it's always kept me safe. But this time I didn't listen, and now I feel betrayed.
There's nothing worse than knowing that you have a certain feeling about not liking wherever you're at, and then choosing not to listen to it. And that is when you aren't honoring yourself and you feel like you feel like you betrayed yourself. It is a terrible feeling. If you're interested in my I Am Lyrical journey, on day 88 in my journal, I have a journal prompt I'll share with you. Reflect on a time when you listened to your intuition and you were right. What happened? How did you feel? What signals did you pay attention to? This is going to help you in this in-between zone as you start to do some small life experiments to gain more data. And this is going to help you decide which ones are for you and not for you. Paying attention to what does it really feel like? What signals am I sensing when my intuition was right and I listened to it? My friend, you need more data. You need to go out there and get more data. If you don't like your job, you don't like your relationship, you need to start asking more questions and ask more questions for yourself. What do I like? What don't I like? What can I start saying no to give myself more space to say yes to other things? And I guarantee you that if you get off your own back and you start to collect more data, start to run a few more experiments, my student who isn't sure about medical school, maybe this is a perfect time for you to start calling some people that have gone through medical school that maybe you're interested in. Maybe find some grad students or some of the advisors at these universities and just set up a call with them and ask them questions. You don't have to know exactly what you're looking for. You just know that you aren't sure, so you need to collect some more data so that way you can do what feels best. And remember that when you get there, when you decide you're out of that in-between zone, you know what you're doing, you know your next step. Trust that it will come up again. That in-between zone of not knowing what to do next is not something that goes away. And so make it okay. Remind yourself this is just a chance for you to grow and learn about yourself. And that's a beautiful thing, and it never goes away. And as crazy as it can make you, the more that we get okay with being in those in between uncertain zones, the more we can actually enjoy things and actually choose things that work best for us. This is the way that we can honor ourselves the best. I mean, how many times have you doubled down on something because you thought it was something you should be doing, and then you just like didn't want to go to work anymore. You just stopped enjoying it as much. What if you're at a job right now that you really don't like, and because you've had this question come up, instead of doubling down on your current job, you started to explore LinkedIn and what other job opportunities there were out there, started to network or started to talk to people who have made career changes. All of a sudden, you might actually enjoy the job you're at a little more. So you might be enjoying your time there rather than making it more miserable for yourself. This isn't easy, and it never is. And at the same time, this whole uncertainty pattern keeps showing up in our life because the one thing that's constant is change. If you're dealing with something where you're in the in-between zone, I'd love to hear about it. Email me at kelsey@kelseymiles.com and share what your in-between zone is. I'd love to learn about it. It's really fun when we get to hear what other people are going through. And if you liked this episode, I would absolutely love if you could share it with a friend of yours and maybe someone who's going through an in-between zone. This could be a brainstorming session where maybe you could help them think of small experiments to get out of that stuckness that you feel. We're not doing any of this alone. I have a community on kelseymiles.com/100days. You can sign up there with your email. I am working on a newsletter to be sent out soon with that. Talking about being in between. I'm in between lots of things, so I need to work on that newsletter. I really appreciate you joining me today on Authenticity Lab. I hope that this topic gives you some peace as you're going through that uncertainty. So I know it. I know that feeling. I know that pressure that you're putting on yourself. And I hope that this maybe helps you breathe a little bit. I know that I just challenged you with taking small steps, and I know I didn't give you this is exactly how you figure it out. But it kind of is taking the small steps, collecting more data, finding out what works for you, dropping the things that don't. That's how you're going to figure it out. And then when you get to the next in-between moment, you can deal with it then. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Authenticity Lab. I'll be back next week with a new life story to help you live more boldly, lead a life of curiosity so you can keep being your most amazing, authentic self.
Yeah, that house will always call you.